Welcome, everyone. This is a presentation about the Verbeek family trip from October 1st to 23rd of 2024, a Southeast Europe, Western Balkans adventure. It's over 3,500 kilometers with Chris, JY, mom and dad. We'll begin, and here you see on the left-hand side of the image, kind of the trajectory we had and the route we followed. Started in Vienna and then rented a car and made our way through various parts of Hungary, a little bit of Slovakia, and then Austria, of course, Slovenia, Croatia, down to Montenegro, and then back up through Bosnia and Herzegovina, and then through Croatia again and all the way back to Vienna. It's a 22-day adventure. So it all started in Edmonton, and we left October 1st, 2024, made our way through Toronto and arrived in Vienna the following day on the 2nd. And so easy trip. Couple of pictures here of from Dad when we were overseas and then when we were arriving in Vienna. So day 2 of the trip, we landed in Vienna and then rented an Airbnb in a little town outside Vienna called Klosternerberg. And it's known by the locals apparently as Kloberg. The Kloberg is the site of a monastery. It's kind of the most famous site there, established in 1114, and it was given to the Augustinians. It's got historical importance for the area. So this is a view just outside the door of our Airbnb in Kloberg. And so we spent a few days in the area of Kloberg, Vienna, to kind of recover from jet lag and discover what we could find in terms of historical and cultural importance. So Klosterberg, Kloberg Abbey, found in 1144, is a 7-minute walk, so very close. This is a Creative Commons photo to give you an idea of the site and what it looked like from a higher view. It's just overlooking the Danube, just north of the city limits of Vienna. It was founded by Saint Leopold III. It was the patron saint of Austria. It was also founded with his wife, there's Agnes of Germany. And it's dedicated to the Nativity of Mary, consecrated in 1136 and remodeled in the Baroque style in the 17th century. So this impressive monastery complex was mostly constructed, like the church on the left there was constructed in the 1100s, and then the monastery, recent monastery, was built in the 1800s, and the foundations included a castle tower and a Gothic chapel. And so from 1630s on, the Habsburg rulers had the facilities, they controlled it, and they had rebuilt it. They rebuilt it in the Baroque style. And then the Abbey Church itself, was restored, and the twin steeples were erected in 1879. So here are some pictures we took from outside the monastery, and then we on day 2, we went inside and visited the kind of a museum now, and then we have on the right the store, a gift store, which is quite impressive, and it's kind of the main entrance of the monastery with some great sculptures on the walls, all stone. And then you can see on the left there, that's even just a metal sitting area, which was made of steel, quite impressive. So a nice start to the trip. So we went inside. It was very quiet, not many tourists. And you can see there's some long walkways and halls, and you can see Chris stairway at the end. And then there's some nice artifacts like the stained glass window on the bottom of the stained glass is a canon from the men's community who was apparently appointed to look after and take care of the pastoral and everyday concerns of the choir women. So this was known as the Custos Dominarum, in Latin, translated as keeper of the ladies. So his name was Albertus Saxo. He was a secular canon, and he's depicted kneeling under St. Augustine. And here's some other artifacts. In this case, actually, it's a map from the 1700s, a drawing by one of the canons depicting the abbey. Um, and so this kind of before the renovations or the reconstruction, the rebuild in the 1700s. And here's one of the artifacts. It's actually uh, a written uh, document by Pope Innocent II that placed the abbey under papal protection. And this is called a visitation, which, so I guess visitations were taking place took place in monasteries where bishops and superiors were checking the conditions of houses, make sure the orders are being followed. And so this one here was a visitation in 1418, and state statutes, new rules to follow, stricter rules on the seclusion and the habits that the people needed to follow there. And then on the adjacent to the church, to the monastery, is the Abbey Church, dedicated to the Nativity of Mary. In the Baroque style, was redone in the 17th century. Quite a pretty church outside and inside as well. And so a nice start. We went shopping in the area, and there was a little store with some knickknacks, and found an interesting wine cellar within the store, which was cool. So visited that, kept going. Just a few blocks away from the Airbnb, here's a statue of Emperor Franz Joseph of Austria. He was the Emperor of Austria, King of Hungary, in the 1800s, actually from 1848 until his death in 1916. And there's a picture of him at the bottom right. So a nice little park with a statue of him. So then day 3 and 4, after spending some time in Coburg and kind of recovering from jet lag, we started visiting Vienna. We started off in Stephansplatz, the square, just in front of St. Stephen's Cathedral, which you can see a reflection of in the stain of in the windows there of the building across. And Chris standing for one of her profile pictures. And St. Stephen's Cathedral, it's around, we see here, 200, 137 meters high. The current Romanesque and Gothic form, the cathedral was largely built in the 1300s. And it stands in the ruins of two earlier churches. And so the first parish church was consecrated in 1147. And it's bore witness to many important events in the Habsburg and Austrian history. And then you'll see the multicolored roof. It's one of the famous for, which we'll see in a few slides. And then we'll get to the top and actually look at the roof, and it's actually 256 stairs from bottom to top. And on the way there, we stopped at the Watchman's Chamber, which was an apartment for watchmen and firefighters, and it was manned there. People were there from the 15th century up to the 1950s, and they would look for trouble and fire, and so they have acoustic alarm. If a fire or storm was spotted, they rang the bells, pointed to where the issue was. So one of the things to do on the way up to 256 steps, and then really the focus is the view and just the roof, the glaze tiles. There's about 250,000 of them, and so it weighs several tons. It's actually got a couple of kilograms per tile. And this was made a bit later in the 1800s. So very pretty. Actually, not made 1800s, but made in 1950. Sorry, after the World War II. And were made in Chechnya, according to the poster on the right. So here a view from the cathedral, and so we can see down at Stephansplatz and the city of Vienna. So it was a bit cloudy, a bit drizzle, not much, so still pleasant to go visit. Another view from the other side, from the top of the cathedral. So yeah, so after that, we decided to go visit the Museum of Military History because it had some interesting artifacts and historical importance. And it was in a pretty old building as well. So we started the tour and saw some really neat things from World War One, World War Two, including this howitzer, 15-inch gun, massive weapon. Um, and then the most interesting artifact was the car that the Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife were in. They were shot in Sarajevo, uh, which caused basically the outbreak of World War One. So you still have the car, and I think there was a few bullet marks. You can't see it much in the picture, but yeah, so there's an importantly historical artifact that was in the museum. Other things that were neat to see was this cupola from a Belgian fortress from 1914 during the siege of Antwerp, and as you can see, it suffered a direct hit from a 30-centimeter shell. It's called an Austro-Hungarian shell, and still stuck there. It didn't make it through. And then on the right, you can see the trigger system. Actually, they cut out part of the rifle, and you can see it's a M95 Carcano bolt and trigger. And so interesting. You can even see the bullet and the powder, so you see how it functions. And then one in the chamber, and then two more in the clip. From there, we decided to visit the Mozart apartments. This is where Mozart and his family lived from 1784 to 87, where he wrote the world famous opera La Nozze di Figaro, and then other things that he wrote within that apartment. It's the largest, most elegant place he lived in, and it's still the only one intact today, and it's now turned into a museum. There's Chris looking out the window. And then in the evening, we decided to go to St. Peter's Church to listen to a classical musical concert by the Vienna Classical Ensemble. So just three violins and one violoncello. And it's one of the things to do when you're in Vienna is to go listen to classical music. So this was happening in St. Peter's Church. And it's a Romanesque church established here by none other than King Charlemagne himself in 792. So quite an old church. So then day five, I got up very early morning to go to the market. No one else wanted to join me. They wanted to sleep in. So, but I was very interested in this antique market and curios, and was looking for specifically some coins or a vintage alarm clock. And so and then by this time, this is around 7 a.m. It's bustling. All the stalls are there, people and shopping. And lucky enough, at one of the stalls, one of the last ones I was visiting, I found an early 1900s vintage German alarm clock. It's a Messner clock, wind-up clock. So I was very happy. And I still have it today now in the office. And it takes time pretty well. So that was our days in Vienna and Kloberg. And here's a map that kind of shows we did what we decided to do on day five. After my visit in the market, we were going to drive through Devon to see a castle, then through Bratislava, spend a few hours there, have lunch, and make our way to Budapest. So 3 countries, Austria, Slovakia, and then end up in Hungary. So it started off with Devon Castle, about an hour from Vienna. It's part of this little village of Devon, which is a borough of Bratislava. And so you can see on the right, it's a tower at the confluence of the Danube and the Morava rivers. And this site has been settled since the Neolithic age. It was fortified and in the Bronze and Iron Ages, later by the Celts and the Romans. The cliff is over 200 meters high, so it's an ideal place for a fort due to its position at the confluence of the two rivers. And the fort watchers, they watched over an important trade route along the Danube. Um, it was called as well as the Amber Road. So the name is castle apparently derives from the word dev, which interpreted as meaning watchtower or observation point. It's one of the oldest castles in Slovakia. and possibly dating back to the 1864 as the first mention in the historical records. Um, and it went through various ownerships, and then what happened that you can't see much of it left because in 1809, after the siege of Pressburg, the castle was destroyed by the retreating forces of Napoleon the First of France. So there was no real reason why. It was more of a show of force, which is unfortunate that it disappeared. And these are the ruins left. Here's the confluence of the Danube and Morova rivers at the castle itself. You can see the village of Devon on the left, and another nice picture of the castle ground on the right, and the Danube in the background. Mum here observing Danube and the ruins. And there's a nice walk along there, and then we have a statue of a Slavic woman by a well-known sculptor. I won't even try to say his name. From there, we drove to Bratislava in Slovakia to spend a few hours and visit the old town. And Bratislava is the political, cultural, and economic center of Slovakia. And you see there on the left is the Slovakian National Theater. So we started walking around the old town in the narrow roads, came across the fountain, main square, and then one of the famous sites in the town is called the Men at Work statue, one of the biggest attractions installed in the 90s to celebrate the renovation of the pedestrian zone. And according to the author, it's an expression of well-being, smile, and good mood that once prevailed here. So pretty, pretty neat statue. So we walked along the grounds. Here you have on the left is Michael's Gate, the only city gate that's been preserved from the medieval fortifications. One of those buildings and goes back to the 1300s. In medieval times, the town was surrounded by fortified walls, apparently, and exit and entry was only possible through four main gates. And it's the last one. You can see there the entrance right there. Then we have more, this is kind of close to where we had lunch. And on the right is just a statue of a famous poet, dramatist, translator, lawyer, and a member of the National Assembly. After Bratislava, we drove to Budapest, and so we're having in the evening, and it was the start of a 2-day visit, and with Buda on the left and Pest on the right, which in the 1800s, after when they built the bridge, which we'll see in a bit later, the two towns became one, and then it's now called Budapest. So we'll walk along where we were in the Jewish quarter, took the metro, which was very deep, and to go to the various areas. First place within actually where we were close to where we were staying, we're actually within the Jewish ghetto. This is a start. This is a marker that shows the start of the Jewish ghetto from the World War II era. And there was quite a few memorials for the Holocaust, the Jews that died, the Jews that died during the Holocaust. And so this is one of the memorials, the shoes on the Danube, that were, and this was actually massacred by fascist Hungarian militia in Budapest during the Second World War. And then we have the Parliament buildings on the left, which we'll see more of during the day and during the evening. Great shots inside and out. And this is the bridge I was mentioning earlier, the Chenier Bridge, Chain Bridge, not sure how to say it. And that's what it was opened in 1849, and which led to the unification of Buda and Pest in 1873 to become Budapest. So quite a pretty bridge. And so you can walk along on the side and all riveted. So really solid structure. And then we made it across to Buda to go visit the Buda Castle district. So the map, an old map of the Buda Castle district historical center with the National Gallery. This is a palace. You've got the Fisherman's Bastion here, St. Matthew's Church. So we visited for several hours along this area. Quite pretty and picturesque. And you can see this is one of the pictures from that area from above the hill. You can see the Parliament building across in Pest. And then the Danube, of course, which splits the two, splits the area in two. More pictures towards Pest from the Buga Castle district. So weather was getting a little better. Quite nice area and time of year to visit, even it was a bit cloudy. Here's a panoramic view, and you have the National Gallery here on the right. And then we're going to make our way from there through the castle, yes, the castle, and then make our way into the Fisherman's Bastion and St. Matthew's Church. Before that, we saw some guards, some, I guess, Buddha guards in front of the castle. Make our way. You can see it's a bit further up, as you can see from this alleyway. Chris, having fun with mom, trying to pick up some books. So now we're making our way towards the Fisherman's Bastion, very close. We're at the Fisherman's Bastion. There he is. There it is on the left. And mom and daughter sitting on the wall of Fisherman's Bastion. And so these original walls were built in the 1700s. They were part of the castle, walls of the castle. And I guess the consensus among historians is that in the Middle Ages, this part of the castle was protected by the Guild of the Fishermen, who lived under the walls in the so-called Fish Town, which was the name Fisherman's Bastion now holds. Massive church in front of Fisherman's Bastion, quite pretty. And then as well, within the district is this beautiful bronze statue of the Virgin Mary and Jesus Child, looking over the Danube, made of bronze. So Chris and I decided to go visit the Hungarian National Museum. So quite an interesting to learn more about the history of Hungary, and here are some artifacts. So an old choir stall from the 1500s and a papal exhibit on the right. And then they had some neat 17th century portrait paintings, including this certain Count Istvan on the right hand side. Had a stop for a quick snack and coffee earlier in the day, and a nice dinner in the Jewish Quarter in the evening. So quite yummy. So right after dinner, we took a night cruise on Danube, which is apparently one of the things to do, and just stunning views. So on the left here, we have the Gellert Hotel, and then we have a view of the Liberty Bridge we crossed over earlier in the day. We have Fisherman's Bastion and Matthäus Church, Budapest University, and then the famous Hungarian Parliament. So we saw earlier in the day with Chris and I in front. Now we have stunning pictures in the evening. And then later in the trip, towards actually the second to last day of the trip, we come back to visit the interior, which we'll see later on in the presentation. So after the cruise, we walked back to the Airbnb through Fashion Street. Much more interesting, though, is we walked in front of the Hani Street Synagogue, which is the largest synagogue in Europe that can hold 3,000 people. And then at the end of the synagogue, you have the Raoul Wallenberg Elm Park in the rear of the courtyard of the synagogue, which holds a memorial to the Hungarian Jews that were martyred. There was about 400,000 Hungarian Jews that were murdered by the Nazis. And so this resembles a weeping willow, and the leaves have the inscriptions of the names of the victims. The next morning, Chris and I went for a long walk to Heroes Square. and it's noted for its iconic Millennium Monument, which it has statues featuring the seven chieftains of the Magyars and other Hungarian leaders, important leaders, and then there's a memorial stone of heroes. So it's also sometimes referred to as the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, but that's not correct apparently. But nice place to visit. So from there, that morning, day seven, we drove from Budapest towards Lake Balaton, one of the uh, jewels of the country, apparently. So we went to visit Vasoy, and that's how uh, my best friend Frederick calls it, because he's Hungarian descent, where his ancestors are from in Tihany, or Tijan, as he would say it. So just not very far, a couple hours or less. We went through the Hungarian countryside, which was quite pretty. And then we ended up first off in Vasoli, which is on the northern shore of Lake Balaton, apparently named after Prince Vasul of a certain dynasty. So I guess after the Ottoman era, the village was repopulated by Hungarians and engaged in viticulture. So this is a native village of Frederick, my best friend's dad, best friend from high school, which I'm still very close to. So his dad name was Joseph Palmer, or Punk was his Hungarian name. We changed it to Palmer before he immigrated to Canada. So this is his hometown, and some of the old style homes with thatch roofed and gorgeous gates. Dad and I were looking for the ancestral home of Frederick's grandfather and father. And we found it. It's right here behind this cart. And this is Frederick's grandfather's wooden wagon, which is held now as a monument within the village. So he was quite proud to tell me. And so we found it. Didn't take very long, not a very big village. And what more important is we wanted to find Frederick's grandparents' tombstone, and his dad. His ashes were brought there and also buried at the tombstone. So we found the Vasoy Cemetery. It was actually the first thing we found when we came into town. Quite a pretty cemetery, and I had a picture of the tombstone, and it only took a few minutes to find. And so here's Frederick's grandfather, Georgie Punk, and his grandmother, Erzsébet Fekete. And then behind that is Joseph Palmer, uh, Joseph Punk. That's Frederick's dad's ashes that were included in the, you can see it was cut out of the tombstone. And then we went a few kilometers away to Frederick's great grandfather's hometown of Tihany, because he, one, wanted to tell us about his distant cousin's restaurant, which was closed, but so we couldn't go in, couldn't meet them. And this is a view from the restaurant. There's Lac Balaton. This is a stock photo I found, give you an idea of the view of the village. But what we were also looking for was his great grandfather's tombstone, which he hadn't seen when he went to bury his dad. They didn't have a time to go visit the Tihan Cemetery. So we did. We split up in the four. So mom, dad, Chris, myself, and Chris found it within 10 minutes because I told him what name to look for with the punk, and there was only a few tombstones with that name. And here's Frederick's grandfather, Georgie Punk. And Georgie means wife of Georgie. So, and then there's some children, a few children there. So took pictures, sent it to Frederick, and so he was quite happy to know that we found it. So after we started in Budapest, went to Vasoy, Dijon, and then made our way a few hours later to Graz, back in Austria. It's about 3 hours, I think. On the way there, we drove by the Sumeg Castle, which is one of the most, it's an investment country, one of the most beautiful, I guess, relatively well-preserved medieval fortress built on a barren hilltop in the 13th century. So we drove by that. But our goal was to make it to Graz. And here's a view from our Airbnb. So right close to the old town. The old town's right here with behind these buildings. So we started there. So that was day 7. So now day 8, morning of day 8, we went walking around Graz. And so City Square, with the city hall behind it, and some neat streets and just beautiful facades, all made out of wood, just gorgeous. And now we see the one of the main interests is on top here is the Graz clock tower and the fire bell, so we can see it. We were from below. Here's kind of a zoom, and the stairs we took actually come down. We took another way to go up. We went from the other side. But here are some pictures when we got up there early morning, and Dad in the picture over here. And so just a gorgeous area to visit, and still well preserved, still functional clock. And then we have some great views from the clock tower. As well, we came back down and visited the cathedral. So very pretty inside, uh, well preserved, obviously. And then across from that, from the cathedral, was the um, Emperor Ferdinand II mausoleum. And so you can see there at the bottom is the his tombstone, his tomb, really. Other things to do in Graz was the Dome Inberg Tunnel, which is an underground space located inside the mountain below the clock tower. And it was a tunnel system that was built during World War II and used as air raid shelters. So there's mom and dad. And then this was our Airbnb. And then after a visit, we were on our way. And so we drove from Graz to Ljubljana in Slovenia. So it's about 2.5 hour drive uh, to Ljubljana. I think I'm saying it right, but I'm not sure. Here is a stock picture of the town to give you an idea of the perspective and the coat of arms. Uh, it's the largest city of Slovenia. Um, It was located around a trade route between the northern Adriatic Sea and the Danube region. Uh, it was north of the country's largest marsh in prehistoric times, I guess. The city symbol is the Ljubljana dragon. So you can see in the coat of arms in the dragon. It's depicted on a number of areas in town, on the top of the castle, on the flags. It's on the coat of arms. It's on the dragon bridge. So you'll see a few pictures of that. And I guess the dragon represents power, courage, and greatness. And the dragon first appeared in the city's crest as a symbol in the 16th century. And I guess there's a long legend, long story, which I'll try to shorten, where this dragon story comes from. This symbol. It's I guess Ljubljana was apparently plagued by a terrible dragon and was terrorizing the land and the villages and the people. And there was a hero named Jason, a Greek hero, arrived in the region, and he had a mission. He wanted to get rid of the dragon and courageously faced the dragon, a fierce battle that lasted for days, and won with his wit and bravery, and outsmart the dragon to defeat it. So there you go. So is there Airbnb in Ljubljana? It was a gorgeous place, not far from a market where Dad was making friends, talking about politics. Um, and then we started visiting. Chris and I actually went for a walk. It was getting a little later in the day. So Mom and Dad were resting. We went for a quick walk along the neighborhoods of Ljubljana and actually made it to towards the old town. And we're getting close there. And it was some neat bicycle structures. And I guess it's a bike friendly area. But it started a bit of raining. We were prepared for it. Not much, but we wanted to go see the river and the old town quickly. Tomorrow, the following day, we did a little better tour. But on the way there, it was funny. We saw these balloons and people, and of course, Chris is much more curious than I am and bold, so walked right over and got us invited to this concert for preschoolers, which is entertaining. So stayed half an hour or so, and it was neat to see within this old structure, and they built this amphitheater within it. It was quite neat. Got to meet a few folks there at the entrance, and were entertained. And then we continued a tour. We thought maybe this was Banksy art, wasn't sure, but it's kind of neat to see that. And then a little bit more rain, got made it to the old base of the old pedestrian zone, and this was called the Presseseren Square, or I guess where there's festivals and it's a meeting point for concerts and protests and so on. So next morning, where we did a better tour, woke up to a bit of rain, but beautiful rainbow, cleared up enough that we didn't need our umbrellas anymore, and walked along the Ljubljana River like Chris and I had done the night before. And better views, better weather, and gorgeous landscaping and architecture along the river. And here's one of the dragon symbols I was talking about, right along the banks of the river. So now we made our way to, well, we actually walked by this street called the Locksmith Street. It's a narrow alley and in the medieval part of town. And so in this cobblestone street, in the gully is there's hundreds of strange little faces and bronze casts, and there's about 700 of these faces. And so walked by that, which was cute, and made our way to the Triple Bridge, which I guess this is part of it we see here, spanning the river, and it connects the historical medieval town to the southeastern bank, to the main square we saw earlier. And this dates back to the 13th century, so it stands as the oldest bridge in town. We see a robot fountain, and one of the highlights of the day was to go visit the Ljubljana Castle atop the hill that we see here. So we made our way, making our way towards that. A few more sites, the Butcher's Bridge with a bunch of padlocks. Went by St. Nicholas Cathedral. So we have the 6 bishops holding Jesus. Really neat sculpture. And then started walking up towards the castle itself. And here's the castle, and you can see the flags with the dragon symbol on this top flag, which we'll see a little better in a few shots. So it's a key landmark in town. They probably constructed around 11th century and rebuilt in the 12th century. And here's the flags with the symbol, the crests of the town, and the dragon. This was a stock photo. Wasn't that good at taking pictures. Really neat staircase to get to the top, and then even more better views. And then you can see the hills around Ljubljana and the town itself. Very picturesque. And so it was spent quite a bit of time up there just enjoying the views. Strong winds, obviously, if you can tell from Chris's hair and Dad's hair. But and with the clouds, it was made it for very pretty sights. And then here you have the courtyard of the castle itself. So castle here, came back down, and then we're walking back towards the Airbnb, or actually we're walking towards a cafe we're looking for. Walked in front of the Philharmonic building, and then I guess walked by the famous dragon bridge, which crosses the river. And this is one of 4 dragons on the bridge. And according to local legends, the dragons will wag their tails when the Virgin crosses the bridge. And some people have nicknamed these structures, these dragon structures, with the nickname Mother-in-Law because of their fiery nature, apparently. So we found our cafe, but on the way there, we also found this massive plant. We weren't sure, so we used Google to figure out it was called an oxy tree, very fast-growing plant. and can reach, I guess, 16 meters in height apparently. So depending on the soil and climatic conditions. But we made it to the Petit Cafe for brunch, which was quite lovely. Um, and after lunch, we drove to Lake Bled. Um, yes, that's right. It was after lunch, which is not far away from Ljubljana, and it's in the Julian Alps, where it joins the town of Bled, and it's an important center during the Brown Age. And there's lots of decorations that were made in appliques that were thought to represent solar and lunar year, so it was known for that. And then the lake actually surrounds this little island called Bled Island, has several buildings, and one is a pilgrimage church dedicated to the Assumption of Mary, built in the 17th century. So very pretty area, very pretty site to go visit. We're here on the shores of Lake Bled. And not far from there, just a few kilometers, there's this gorge, the Vintgar Gorge and the Radnova Valley River. So, class two, class three type of rapids. So very, very pretty to see and to hear. And I think I have a video here we can look at. I don't think we can hear the sound, but it was just uh, kind of neat to see the river flow. So took a short recording of it. And then came back to town and went for some Chinese food, just a short walk away from the Airbnb. It was very yummy. Um, so Dad and I went for dinner, and the ladies stayed at home. I think they had food at home. They didn't feel like going out. All right, so that was day 9. Day 10, big day. Drove from Ljubljana, and our destination was Rijeka in Croatia. But on the way there, or Chris's idea, found while researching the area these called Scotian caves, which were fascinating to visit. So we spent an afternoon seeing that. So the next slides will be pictures of that area. So here's the start of the visit at the Scotian caves. It's apparently Europe's largest underground river canyon. It's where the Reka River starts flowing underground, which can be seen from inside the underground canyon, which is quite spectacular. The cave is apparently several million years old, first recorded in written history by the Greek astronomer Posidonius in the second century BC, and so well-known caves. And the river flows in these underground caves for over 30 kilometers, and then it emerges in Trieste, Italy, and flows in the Adriatic Sea. So here we're walking. It's a bit of a walk from the main parking lot and the visitor center. And then we make our way to the entrance of the caves with certain ground rules we have to follow, safety rules. And then we started visiting the caves. But before, I guess, yeah, what I have here is I want to show the entrance of the river. So the river, Reka River, this is just a few hundred meters before the entrance. So and we saw this after visiting the caves, but since it's where the river flows in, I thought it'd be appropriate to start with these slides. So Chris and I hiked around a bit after visiting the caves and to see where the river enters the cave system. So we have some waterfalls close by or close to the entrance. And then quite spectacular falls, a bit, I would say, similar to Athabasca Falls in Jasper Park. So quite pretty to see. And so here's the beginning of the tour once we're in the cave. And we were only allowed to take pictures further in to the system. And actually, it's where the more spectacular views have occurred, anyways. So you can see this, it's distinguished by actually being an underground river that we can actually see very well. And the other distinguishing factor is the average height is 100 meters for these caves. So this is the same Reka River we saw on the outside now flowing inside. And then there's a walkway over the river itself. There's a couple of walkways we went through. A few more pictures of these spectacular views of the river flowing on the ground. Never seen something like this before, so we all were very impressed. And the views were gorgeous. Here's some more. This is kind of, you can see the walkway along the river inside the caves as we're making our way through the system. Very pretty. And then, yeah, you can see here through this the second walkway, and then you got the caves going, the river going through, and then the walkway again going further above. This is when we're starting to go back up. And then towards the end, it was this really neat formation. They call it rimstone pools. And I guess it's caused by gradual deposition of calcium carbonate from the river. Um, and it's water that gets pools along the edges. And then with the carbonate participating, it creates these pool type of structure. And so that's is us exiting the cave. And then the earlier pictures were taken from the air outside where the water actually comes in from that side. And then walking around, a few interesting signs. It's obviously a World UNESCO Heritage Site. And then there's this other cave, not very close by, called the Atomic Cave, which was used in the Middle Ages and then antiquity and prehistoric times, apparently, in the Bronze and Copper Age. And I guess was used as well as a religious site. And that was the entrance to it. Although we couldn't go in, but you could see inside of it. So then we left um, the caves and made our way to Rijeka in Croatia. We got hit by a huge rainfall, which we almost kind of hydroplaned on the highway there, so it was a bit tricky, but we made it. And then we made it to our Airbnb with some interesting parking again, but we were very far up. This Rijeka is it's kind of a hilly town and so here's our view from our Airbnb from the top of the town. And there's a view from our balcony. You can see the storm passing by and the sun finally coming back. And then we had not far from the Airbnb this lovely restaurant, so we went for dinner. Then the next morning in the Rijeka, uh, Mom and Chris are having a little eccentric session overlooking Rijeka and the Adriatic Sea. So quite neat. And similar view from last night, from the night before, from our Airbnb. And I guess the town itself, Rijeka, was strategically positioned with an excellent deep water port. So it was fairly contested, apparently, between the Roman Empire and during with Italy and Croatia and changing rulers many times over the centuries. It's a key point. So went for a morning walk. The first set of pictures are from just up from our Airbnb, about 100 steps above. And this is Rijeka, the castle called, sorry, the Trust Castle in Rijeka, and was built in the 13th century. And it thought what was written there is that the castle lies on the exact spot of an ancient Illyrian and Roman fortress. So very pretty site. It was remodeled in the 1800s, so you can see more of a Greek architecture style mixed in with the old fortress um, with the mole cannon. So it was a very pretty site, very calm. Not many tourists. Again, the dragon symbol was also very prevalent in this area. And then a nice view. This is a castle ground and the courtyard. Um, and then the sea over here. And then more views from the opposite side, looking away from the Adriatic Sea. You can see into the hills around Rijeka. And there's the main highway we took to come in, which was the night before. Very pretty area. So we went for a walk around and see what else there was to see and do in Rijeka. When we found this really neat, it's called a Sanctuary of the Mother. were known as a shrine of Our Lady of Trust. So a peaceful park in front of a Franciscan monastery. You can see behind that, here's the monastery there. And he's holding the hand of one of the uh, Franciscans who had died recently. His name was Seraphin Sabol. But the park we're about to enter, you can see here behind that, um, had this really neat representations of the Stations of the Cross, which made of bronze and stone, in various places along the walkway in the park. And Mom quite enjoyed it, and I enjoyed it as well. It was a nice walk. We all did actually. And I guess it's the oldest sanctuary dedicated to the Virgin Mary in Croatia and visited by uh, numerous pilgrims that come from across Croatia and abroad. So a nice find. Also, we have various stations at the cross here in the next slides. And so we walked the whole thing and spent some time at each one of these stations. So station 12, 13. So you can see the various moments representing the crucifixion and then the resurrection on the last stations. So nice morning, nice place to walk around and explore. Very peaceful, not many tourists at all. So we're a good time of the year to get there. So once we've done, finished kind of visiting in the area, we then started off on our new daily trek. Drove about 3.5 hours along I guess they call it the Dalmatian coast, from Rijeka all the way to Zadar, which was our destination for the day. So day 11. So we've leaving Rijeka and then we're starting to drive along the coast. Very picturesque. And so we stopped in various places once we saw a nice spot, and there's not many places to pull off the road. So once we would find one, we would, and then see these great views, great pictures. And all the pictures you're seeing, I took a ton. Dad took some, and I had some from Chris as well. So we had a nice collection of pictures. We stopped in the village of Senj. I think it's how do you say it? Nice little port village. You can see fishing boats and pleasure boats. Kept going, and there's a nice spot here. You can see the scenery, and it's getting a little more dry in terms of, and then less vegetation. So an interesting landscape. So similar landscape as we're driving towards Zadar. And then even some of these islands are totally almost barren. There's not much growing. So very different topography than when we were geological formations than we were just a day earlier. So nice panoramic view here and so tons of islands as we're driving along. Then we have a nice site called Jablanak right over here. And then we stopped there for lunch. And there was one restaurant open, luckily. And in October, not, a lot of things are closing down, and they were only open for another 2 weeks, and they were closing down for the season. So it was a good time to go. We still had enough places to visit and places to eat and stay, and but with no crowds. So that was wonderful. Chris, you were stretching. Then after lunch, kept going. Went by the village of Karlobag. Again, lots of boats in these little port villages and these coves and bays. Village of Modrik, village of Rovanjska, and luckily we have Google and GPS coordinates, so they're easy to find the names on Google Maps. And then we finally made it to Zadar, and here's a evening shot got from National Geographic site to give us an idea of the perspective of the town. And I guess it's the oldest continuously inhabited city in Croatia. It's been, I guess, the site's been populated since prehistoric times. And the earliest evidence of human life come from the late Stone Age, which and then various sediments have been dated as early as the Neolithic time. And so by the 7th century, Zadar had become an important center of trading activities with the Phoenicians, the Etruscans, ancient Greeks, and Mediterranean people. So a place with a lot of history. And you can tell from the old town, some of the sites. Here's the St. Donatus Church, some Roman ruins here. So we got there early evening and then got a chance to visit and see a bit of the town before the sunset, and had a beautiful sunset along the coast in Zadar. And then there's neat uh, square here that people would with like a glass platform of some sort. So kind of neat place to visit. And then this after sunset, we walked around a bit of the old town. So we only spent one night in Zadar because we really wanted to spend time in Split and Dubrovnik. So, but it was a nice stop, and so we kept our drive along the Croatian coast and tried to avoid going inland. A few places we had to, like over here, and then closer towards Split as well. But most of the time we were along the coastline. So great driving, crazy drivers, crazy motorcycle drivers. But we did our own thing and followed the rules and didn't drive too erratic like some of the guys we saw. Um, oh yeah, one thing to mention is before we got to Split in Trogir where the airport is. We dropped off Chris at the Split airport in Trogir for her return to Canada via Vienna, and then we made our way, mom, dad, and I, to Split for lunch, dinner, and then checking in for at our Airbnb to spend the night in Split. So a village of Kajizje, quick stop there. And so anytime we had a chance to stop, stretch our legs, look at the scenery, we did. And then we found this really neat area called the Makerina Cove or Makerina Village. So there's a village across this little cove in this forest here. And I guess the Makerina area has a lot of Aleppo pine trees. You don't see them as we get in. And it's an area populated by the Romans in the first century. Um, and it's close to Pirovac, I guess. And then you can see some of these older trees and forest. Um, and quite a nice. We didn't spend a lot of time, but it was a nice stretch, and there was a lot of historical boards to read, so it was a neat place to visit. And then a nice, and this I guess over here is a village of Brodakari, and then the village of Marine a little further after we left the area of Macarena. Or how did I say that? Maquirina. That's right. So after that, yeah, kept going along the coast and made a few stops. And then we had, I mentioned earlier, we had to go into the countryside and inland a bit, but it's still very picturesque. And then went back towards the coast, and we finally hit the village of Trogir, which is a bigger area outside of Split, and that's where the airport was. And we finally made it to our Airbnb in Split, outside the old town, a little further from the old town, but a great view. So we actually, and it was a nice Airbnb, 2 bedrooms. So that's what we were striving for, always trying to get 2 bedrooms. A few times we couldn't, but most times we could, and pretty decent price. I think this was under $150 Canadian a night, so outstanding prices at this time of year and selection. So this is our sunset from Split. So very nice, and just again here, not many tourists, very quiet, and very few people. There was a few people behind us, but not in front of us along this coastline, not far from our Airbnb. So then day 13, we got up. Here's a Creative Commons photo to give a aerial view of Split itself. And here's the old town where we spent most of our time, which is a really most interesting part. And here's you can see here, this is where the cruise ships would arrive. I think over here as well. Yeah, and then so we spent the morning visiting Split, which was founded as a Greek colony in the third or second century BCE. And in 305 CE became the site of the palace of the Roman Emperor Diocletian. So we had fun getting lost in this maze of narrow streets. You can see it's very narrow, very interesting, very pretty, and very old. And I guess it's the second largest city in Croatia after Zagreb, which we'll see in a few days. So here's the Delian Palace, built in the third century AD as a residence of the Roman Emperor Diocletian, and today forms about half of the old town of Split. It's referred to as a palace because it was intended as to use as a retirement residence of the emperor, but it looks more like a fortress. And about half of uh, the palace was used for personal use, and the rest was used to house a military garrison, apparently. So, but very, very pretty area, very well preserved when you think about it, being 1,500 years old or more than that. And then we made our way along the very narrow streets and just and very quiet. Not no, there was no cruise ships that morning there, so it was great. When the cruise ships arrived, we saw in Dubrovnik later, it was hordes of people going everywhere. So and then we got lucky here. We got up early enough and missed all that bustle. So it was fun to go and explore. And just a few people walking around with us. Found a cafe, had coffee. Lovely. And then we went outside the fortified walls um, of the old town, and then we kind of found this large statue called Dad's Buddy, Bishop Gregory of Nin, and I guess he's a famous Croatian figure who served as a medieval bishop and was strongly opposed to the Pope in official circles of the Catholic Church. And I guess he introduced the Croatian language in the religious services after the Great Assembly of 926. And until that time, everything was in Latin. So I guess he's a well-known figure in Croatian history. And so walked around again the old town, found some neat places to see, and then kept on going. So we went from that morning Split and drove another 3 hours ish along the coastline. Then had to go inland a bit. Whoops. Through this big bridge we're going to see later, long, long bridge, and then back inland into towards Dubrovnik. It's a nice, quite a nice drive. You actually have almost more spectacular than previous days, as you'll see from the pictures. So we're just leaving Split, and you can tell there was a bit of a forest fire here. And then we got into inland and saw these great views of the mountainous area. And here you same picture as before, which parked the car, drove walk along to go take these great shots, and then kept driving along, making stops along the way. This is called Vruja Bay, and the panoramic. It was just stunning, great spot to stop and enjoy the scenery. And then stopped at a few villages, Promanja, village of Vigrane, just gorgeous. And then we also, like with the car, making it very flexible. And we saw these, or Dad saw these wild olive bushes. So we stopped and picked some olive, tasted them. It's very bitter. So it was fun to do that. Good stop for everyone. Stretch our legs. We went to Podgora, and then we had to go inland again. And we went by this lake, this, I guess, Neretva Valley, and this lake, Batinska Jezera. There was a nice viewing area there. We kept going as we then had to turn towards inland, went by this Vlaka area, a little more agriculture. You can see some wineries, and then made our way to the Jesak Bridge, which is long, gorgeous bridge, 2 kilometers long. And then we drove on an island for a little bit, or kind of a peninsula more than an island. Went by the village of Slano and finally made our way to the city of Dubrovnik, which accessible, as you can see, by sea for cruise ships. In this case, there were two docked as we got there late afternoon. Um, and then we got to our Airbnb, another great spot, great view. And you can see one of the ships had already left. And I guess the ships leave towards early evening. And then other ships come the next morning. But that so that by that early evening, it gets quiet again in the city. So then we went on our way to go find a restaurant, which was down a lot of steps, a bit like Rijeka. It's a very hilly town with a lot of steps. So we're on our way for dinner and coming back from dinner. And then day 14, that was day 13, yes. So now day 14, you can see uh, kind of an aerial view to give a perspective of Dubrovnik. And here's the old fortified town, uh, which is also a UNESCO heritage site that we spent the day visiting, day 14. Um, it's a medieval architecture. It goes back, I guess the city's apparently dates back to the 7th century. Was known as Ragusa. It was founded by refugees. It was under the protection of the Byzantine Empire, and then it was later under the sovereignty of the Republic of Venice. And so between the 14th and 19th centuries, actually Dubrovnik ruled itself as a free state. And then its prosperity is really based on maritime trade. Now the entire city was destroyed in 1600, 1667 by an earthquake, and then it rebuilt, and then during the Napoleonic Wars, it was occupied by the French forces. Now in 1991, during the Croatian War of Independence, it was actually besieged by the Yugoslav army for seven months actually, and suffered quite a bit of damage from shelling. And then afterwards, there was a lot of restoration in the 90s and 2000, and it reemerged as a top tourist destination. And this slide here shows all the um, the places that were damaged by the aggression during the army, the Yugoslav army, the Serbs and the Montenegrins during the 91-92 siege. But we saw it was only something around 50 million to rebuild all this to its original state. So not too significant of a cost, I guess, when you look at the big picture. So from our Airbnb, we walked along the coastline towards the old town. So these are views from that. And this is a high-end hotel with its own private beach here. This crazy. I can't imagine how much would cost to stay there. Another thing, we enjoyed our Airbnbs and meeting some of the owners and the comfort of that. So kept going along the coast to finally get to the old town, and this is the fortified wall just before the entrance, the access. There's a few entrances, two main entrances to the old town. So now here we're inside the old town. A few more people than in Split, but still not very crowded. Not yet, not until the cruise ships. People showed up usually around after 9, and they stayed around until 4. I guess is kind of the what we observe and read. So walked around, found our way to the Holy Annunciation, the Church of the Holy Annunciation. So cute little church. Went by the rector's palace, and I guess it was served as a seat of the rector of the Republic of Ragusa between the 14th century and the early 1800s. It was actually a defense building in the Middle Ages, destroyed by fire, and then the city-state decided to build a palace on the same spot. One of the highlights to do is to walk up these, it's called the Jesuit stairs. I guess it's an example of Baroque architecture. It's lovely, elegant stairs that leads up to the Church of Saint Ignatius of Loyola that we visited afterwards. His dad taking a picture of me taking a picture of him. Common theme in the trip. And here we are in the Church of Saint Ignatius of Loyola. Very pretty. One of the things to do. We kept walking around. We kind of stayed at the bottom level. Here you could, for a $50 fee, take the higher level, but very little shade. This is one of the few places. It was a bit hot. and crowded. So we just decided to stay at the lower levels and still enjoy a tour of the town. Assumption Cathedral, we quickly visited, and then we got into the harbor area, which was quite lovely and quiet. Wasn't too busy. And then luckily there was actually a cafe right close by that we stayed and stopped at. Just in the next pictures, but a very pretty area. And here's a cafe. There's the harbor over here. So we found a little cafe with big shade from there, lots of shade from this big tree. And then after our little breakfast lunch, we coffee, we kept going, kept walking. Now we're exiting, getting towards the exit along the harbor. Um, kept actually we went back in, that's right. And then we went back down to go visit some more, go through the old, and you can see there's a little more people now. I think the cruise ships are here, so it's getting more crowded. Oh yeah, that's right, because I wanted to go see, and we all did, the War Photo Museum, which is a bit of a stark reminder how these countries in the Balkan area were devastated during the Yugoslav wars in '90s. So this is photojournalists that were there captured some of these incredible moments. Like this fellow, this few minutes before he was executed, just terrible to see the fear in his eyes. So a very sober moment to go through that museum, and we were allowed to take pictures of the pictures, and gives you a sense of what it was like, a very little glimpse of what it was like during those wars. So then we had an afternoon nap and then headed back to town to take the gondola to the top of Mount Third, I think how you say it, and it overlooks the entire city of Dubrovnik and the Adriatic Sea. And we wanted to stay up there to see a beautiful sunset, which we enjoyed and experienced. So it was just amazing. Not many people, which is great because, like I said, after four, the tourists tend to go back to their cruise ships, so it becomes quiet again. So great views from up there. We spent about an hour and a bit just relaxing and seeing the sunset on the city. There's that exploring, and then you get the lights that starting to appear from the city below. So it was neat because we then decided to go back down the same step we saw earlier to go explore in the evening and see the lights of the town, of the old town. And then now still making our way to the original gate that we came in to go back to our Airbnb. And this is as we're leaving, and a picture behind us of the old town and the fortress. So that was day 14. So day 15, we left from Dubrovnik to keep going. That's our last day along the Dalmatian coast, really, and to make our way to Kotor, which is a site that had been recommended by Tiffany, actually, who was monitoring our WhatsApp channel and recommended Kotor, and I had read as well about Kotor. So I said, okay, let's go to Kotor, and in Montenegro. So we drove along. We had to cross the border. Uh, we had to go through some very stern-looking border crossing customs officers, but we made it through. And then, but we had some great shots along the way and great stops. Stopped in a town of Topla with its own little fortress, and I think we had lunch here. Great food, poor internet, but a good spot to stop. And then I had to figure out once we got to Montenegro, the Wi-Fi and then the data plans was a little tricky, but figured it out. We stopped to visit the vegetation. So these giant reeds, these giant evergreens. So again, the flexibility of a car, we can stop and go anywhere we want. So now we're into Montenegro, and we're now starting our drive along the Kotor Bay, which was just gorgeous, a spectacular drive. So basically going all around the bay to make our way to the little town of Kotor. So this is the start of the drive. And this is the Bay of Kotor, and this is called this little island here, Our Lady of the Rock. It's a little bit of an inlet. islet, I guess they call it. And it's actually an artificial island that was created by a bunch of rocks, sinking old ships that were seized and loaded with rocks. And then they built this Catholic church of Our Lady of the Rocks on the islet. So we're driving, you can see the islet a little further in. So we're going all around the bay and then making our stops just to enjoy the scenery and the quietness. Not very touristy at this time. Like, although there's cruise ships which we tried to avoid that make our way, they actually make their way through this bay to the old town of Kotor. Now we're in the far end, so we entered on this side, drove along, and now we're over here looking at the on the other side of the islet. Um, and then we enjoyed some vegetation. This was like a wild pomegranate that Dad found. And then in this Bay of Kotor, you see that was the Our Lady of the Rocks on the right, and then this is a natural island called this is Veti Dorde Island on the left, which has trees growing and has a bit of an infrastructure on there as well. Nice stop. And then we kept going and we finally made our way to Kotor. And then we found our Airbnb, which was outside the old town, and then went for a quick visit to go see the Kotor, uh, old Kotor, old town. And then you can see up here is the Kotor Fortress, which is over 1,300 steps, which we're going to do the next day. Dad and Mom said, "You guys go ahead. I'm going to relax." We got up early to go do that. Pictures are going to come shortly for that. But this is a relatively small fortress when you compare it to Split or Dubrovnik, but quite pretty, great views, very historical, dating back to the 6th century and the Romans. And it was under the control of the Serbian medieval state from the 12th to 14th century, and then followed by the Venetian Republic from 1400 to almost just before 1800. So we're entering now one of the gates, and then very pretty, lots of cobblestones, old stone buildings, old churches. Oh, this is actually more a recent church, but very well maintained and very nice place to visit. So this is the Serbian Orthodox Church, since it was under Serbian control. So you see more of those type of churches. The Church of Saint Luke. This one was very old, found in 1195. We have the Church of Blazena Ozana. So even if it was in a small area, there's quite a few churches within this fortress or this fortified town. Nice bazaar we got to visit, and then right at the exit towards one of the gates is the clock tower that's still standing, built in 1602. And then we were able to walk on the top of the fortified walls. In this case, it wasn't a $50 fee like in Dubrovnik, it was free. So it was nice to go to see that. And here's the port where the cruise ships would come in. And then we actually see one of the cruise ships arriving late that afternoon. Church of St. Nicholas. And then towards the end of the day, you can see the sun's setting and the lights are coming on, one of the bastions of the old town. So, day 16, Dad and I got up early. I think it was around 7. We were finally out the door at 7:30, and we decided to climb the 1,350 steps to the Kotor Fortress and back. And we definitely felt it in the shins and the quads. So I definitely did for several days. And then this is our pictures of our adventure. So we're just starting, a few steps in. Now we're about a fifth of the way up the fortress, and you're starting to see perspective of the old town. And kept going up. Nice panoramic view. You can see there's a cruise ship there. Um, that's now also, I think this one's arriving. Yeah, so this is another one coming in. The one earlier, I think, was already left. Um, and so you can see when these cruise ship with a few thousand people, this would get flooded with people pretty quick. So we avoided that. So we only had a few people on the walk with us at that time in the morning. And now we're about 2/3, 2/5 of the way up the fortress. And you can see how these steps were made. You can walk on the side of steps or the steps themselves. But this gorgeous, spectacular views. And then, about halfway up, there's this Roman Catholic church built in the 1500s called Our Lady of the Remedy. And then we had a little buddy that decided to join us, this wild dog. And then this is a view of the church and the bay behind it. Now we're about four-fifths of the way up, and you can get even better perspective. And I think this cruise ship hasn't moved. Was kind of in the wait, probably trying to get permission to, or we also saw sometimes there were some boats coming to get the passengers, and they weren't quite docking. So, but anyways, behind us here is the Kotor Fortress. A bit of in ruins, but neat to visit. So we finally made our way up to the main fortress, and you can see the main sights. And there's another cruise ship over here coming in. So it's a busy place. It's quite pretty. And here's a really good view of the steps we used to come up, the 1,350 steps. And now we're at right at the top of the Kotor Fortress. And just, you can see a nice panoramic view of the whole area. And then started making our way down. So 1,300 steps down, slowly but surely, and we finally made it all the way back down to and then here's kind of our last view of the Kotor Old Town. Okay, so then from Kotor, we spent day 16, packed our bags, left before the two cruise ships arriving in town, and started making our way inland. And our goal for this day was to make our way to Mostar. So as we left the old town of Kotor, and it was way in the back here in the inlet, and you can see we drove kind of backwards from when we came in and all along the coast, and then we back into the mountain ranges, and then we got a view of the Kotor Bay. So last view, quite gorgeous, spectacular as the day before, and last sights of the area. And now we're making our way inland, and we see a bit of the Montenegro countryside. We had a stop by what is called Bileka Lake. So we're on the Montenegro side, but over here on the other side is Bosnia and Herzegovina. So very close to Kotor in a way. And then by Bileka Lake on the Montenegro side, and that was the picture was taken at this hilltop church called Saint Ignatius. Uh, no, there's no one there, but we got to visit the grounds and the cemetery behind the church, just in a great spot overlooking the lake and on the mountaintop. And the lake is behind there. That's where the picture before was taken. And some really interesting uh, tombstones, and you can see that some of these, like she would have died around the time of the Yugoslav wars. And we saw some younger people from the 90s and some new tombstones, so definitely would have died during the Yugoslav war. And then we kept going and finally crossed into Bosnia and Herzegovina and got to visit the countryside there and some of the natural wonders like this Big Greva River. Crystal clear water, just beautiful. A nice place to stop and beautiful shore and walkway, little walking area, a shoreline. So more countryside and some farming in this area. And so we're basically in kind of the Bosnian and foothills and getting into the mountains as we're making our way to Mostar. One stop before we got to Mostar, which was a must-do according to all the sites we were looking at, was the Kravica waterfalls. So a natural wonder, very well visited, but not too busy when we got there. So we parked car and then started walking down towards the fall. So you can see here from the distance. And then once we got to the falls themselves, right in the middle of the day, so it's a little difficult to capture them, but we got a good sense of what they look like, and they were quite nice and pleasant to be there. And then so the waterfall kind of goes along. It's a series of waterfalls along the hillside there. So after visiting the waterfalls, we made another stop in Medjugorje, which is an unofficial place of Catholic pilgrimage since the Virgin Mary allegedly appeared on the apparition hill. It's called 1981. So visited that. No picture of that area, unfortunately. But from there, we made our way to Mostar, which just a fantastic place. And then you can tell you're going to start seeing a lot of minarets, one here, one here. So Bosnia and Herzegovina is a majority Muslim area. And then this is a view from our Airbnb. So towards the village, the old town, and it is away from the old town. And then we got a chance to visit the old bridge before the sunset. One of the main attractions of the village, built in the 1500s during the Ottoman Empire. It's the longest single arch constructed bridge in the world for centuries, and it was unfortunately destroyed in 1993 during the Civil War. But then it was reconstructed brick by brick, stone by stone, as a UNESCO initiative as a symbol of reconciliation. But you see, not very busy. And then after the sunset or during the sunset, we kind of walked around the old town. You can see it's very well established for a long time. So day 16, um, woke up. Well, this is the end of day 16, and in the after this, just after sunset, you can see now the lights starting to turn on of the Monstar, and then you have the minarets. And of course, in the next morning and during the day, you could hear the song, the cry, the call to prayer, which was quite relaxing. So the next morning, I got up really early so we could tour the old bridge with relatively few people around, and it was wonderfully quiet. And we ended up exploring the old bridge and the surrounding area. And you can see how they reconstructed uh, the old bridge using similar stonework and patterns. And you can see the archway here. So this is the entrance to the bridge. Then a few pictures, and you can see how it arches and arches way back down into the old town. So really a neat architectural wonder of this area. And there's mom and dad on the bridge. So very quiet at that time of day. And then so started making our way into the old town and through these cobblestone or cobble rocks, really, and pattern like all along. Very old village. And then a number of minarets everywhere. So lots of mosques. So that morning at 6:15, we got the wake up call for the call to prayer and over the loudspeakers through these minarets. Um, and then it actually reminded me of when Chris and I were in Turkey, in Istanbul, and we heard the first time I had heard the call to prayers. So it's just I think we saw this bridge from the night before, and then more pictures of the area, and you can really see the pattern like on the ground. And then in the really interesting piece here is the slate stone, which was incredibly durable, but you can see how thick it is. And so you can imagine how heavy this roof is. So the structure has to be pretty strong. And then after our return to our apartment, just outside of the old town, we met up with the owner to say our goodbyes. And it was actually, we ended up talking for a good half hour, 45 minutes, and it was very enlightening conversation. And the generous fellow was explained to us some of the history of Bosnia and the peaceful cohabitation that existed within the religions for centuries, and then gave us a perspective of what led to the Yugoslav wars, his own experience, because Mostar was under siege for over 9 months, and he was working at the only operational radio station at the time, and the city was about 80% destroyed. But as he was saying, the people banded together under the UNESCO leadership and led to a reconstruction, a peaceful reconstruction and reconciliation. And then they went on to explain some of the tenets of Islam, and so it was a really nice discussion with him. Wonderful person. And then he had recommended we go visit this place called Blagaj Tekja. They're not far away from Mostar. So it's a kind of a dervish monastery built around the 1500s with some Ottoman architecture, Mediterranean style, and I guess it's a national monument. And so this kind of explains the site of this dervish house, um, and some of what it was for and how it was used. And here's some pictures of the dervish house. And so just built basically within the cliffside along the river where this river starts here in this area. And I think it's called the uh let's see, there was a name for the river. The Buna River is what it's called. So crystal clear and comes out from the mountainside right beside the monastery. So it's kind of a very holy, important site for Bosnia Herzegovina. So very pretty, picturesque place. And then here's we were really impressed, Ed and I, about the slate roof, stone roof. I can't imagine you need to change this roof very often. Last centuries. So from Mostar, from the Blagaj, we went from this holy site back right around, had to go through Mostar to make our way to Sarajevo. Um, what was tricky and a little nerve-wracking, I guess, is or the owner of the Airbnb had warned us that there was a lot of flooding in the area and some landslides and rock slides and roads closures. So it'd be possibly difficult to get through here. But him and his wife kind of looked at a report and said we should be able to go through this road to make our way to Sarajevo. So with the uncertainty, but with the sense of adventure, we made our way and start to drive around the mountainous area of Bosnia and Herzegovina towards Sarajevo. Not certain what we would encounter. But we did encounter some incredible scenery, as you can see here. So made a few stops to enjoy the views, um, other areas. Not quite sure what the village is, but it's just beautiful. And then that's where it got tricky. We hit the area where it just recently, within, it looks like less than a week, had some flooding, rock and landslides. You can see here all these buildings that submerged from this rock slide. So can't imagine how many people were injured, or maybe they uh, were able to escape before this all happened. But you can see these cars just full of mud, damaged homes. So just then you can see all the tape here from the police. So this is all recent. And then at some point, a few areas were down to one lane and it was traffic controlled. And obviously these were rolled around from whatever mudslide, some of the remnants left there, and the stuff that kind of rolled over through here. And now they're just basically starting to work around digging up the mud, restoring the area. So a bit scary, but luckily we missed all that. And then we finally arrived to Sarajevo. And what we have here is gun and shell damage from the wars. And this is in Sarajevo. But as we got closer to Sarajevo, we started noticing this pattern of buildings and villages that were damaged by shell and gunfire during the war, and it remained. It hasn't been repaired or reconstructed. So it was very eerie to see that. And this is just a few pictures, a block away from where we were staying in this nice apartment Airbnb, but not everywhere had been repaired. So we made it. And then when we arrived, we were famished because we didn't stop for lunch and there wasn't many places to stop. We just wanted to make it. But so we got there around just before 5, started looking for restaurants, and then I guess things didn't open till 6. But we somehow walked by one restaurant, and the owner was outside smoking, and we asked if it was open. No, we don't open till 6. But then he obviously noticed we were needing to eat, so he actually opened the restaurant early, and didn't have many options. He said, "I said all I got is a traditional Bosnian pot dish," and of course we said yes. It's just like a potato and veggie potato stew, a beef stew. It was just delicious, and so Dad gave him a good tip. And one funny thing was that the apartment, the glasses were crooked, which was kind of neat. So then after dinner, I just decided to go for a quick walk to go kind of explore it a little bit. Made my way to the Sacred Heart Cathedral, and then not far from the Museum of Crimes Against Humanity, which I quickly visited. And then we decided to go visit the next morning more in depth to go learn more about the Yugoslav wars and what happened during that time. So next morning, day 18, this is our Airbnb, and start making our way towards the museum. And again, more evidence of war damage, uh, just kind of scars of war that have been left to be visible so people don't forget, I guess. And then making our way back to the Sacred Heart Cathedral. Now we can see it in the daytime. But as you can see here, the churches were not immune to from the fighting during the wars. And we found out that morning that during the 92-95 Bosnian War, there was over 600 mosques that were destroyed, 300 were damaged, and then 300 some 50 Catholic churches were destroyed or damaged, and then 125 or so Orthodox churches were reduced to ruins. So here you can see the damage to the left corner of the Sacred Heart Church that has stayed as is since the war. But the inside, very pretty mural, stained glass and interior. Really pretty statue of a modern statue of Pope John Paul II. And then we started walking away towards the river, the Miljacka River, I think it's called. That's right, Miljacka. So now we're here towards the river and walked on both sides of the bank, and some pedestrian bridges and car bridges here and there. Here's a view, I guess it's called the Latin Bridge, pedestrian footbridge over the river. And then we went back in to towards the old town and visit some of the old buildings and old mosques. So we have the Gazi Usarev Beg Mosque, the Fer Hadja Mosque. And notice that we've seen this a few places, and we'll see it again further into the presentation. The tall and slim tombstones, which seems to be a tradition in the Muslim faith, Muslim cemeteries we've seen in Bosnia. Made it finally to the Museum of Crimes Against Humanity and Genocide. So at the entrance to the museum, kind of give a sense of the mission of this place, and some of the uh, quotes you can see quite memorable and apropos. And then we've found out more what occurred during the Bosnian War and the atrocities against the Muslim civilians. Just terrible. And then and this was like a room full of peace messages from visitors. And then really this kind of summarized well what it looked like in terms of the religious uh, areas. So a Muslim area here in Kosovo. We didn't go to Kosovo; it wasn't recommended yet. So, but majority Orthodox around Serbia, Montenegro, Catholic in Croatia, Slovenia, and then have a mix in Bosnia Herzegovina. And then it was a very objective place in a way. And then they weren't there to blame; they're just there to explain what happened and what kind of led to the wars um, and then how it all ended. Um, so difficult time in this area, and now I think they're starting to 30 years on to recover and move on, which we've heard from a few people that it's time to move on. Only a few seconds for people to finish reading the slide if you're looking at it. Okay, so from Sarajevo, we kept on, yeah, day 18. Our final goal was to go to Jasce, and we made our way through this little village called Travnik, kind of a medieval town. Stopped for lunch. So, and this wasn't, I guess it wasn't as risky in terms of floods in this area of the country. So we were felt fairly confident to make our way through the mountain ranges. Quite foggy, I must say, but not too bad. So we can still get some good views um, through the countryside and the mountain ranges. It's a bit rainy, but a very enjoyable drive. Reminded Dad of going through Hope, BC. And first stop was this medieval village of Travnik, which was at one time the capital of the Ottoman Empire. But you can see here very Muslim town as well with the minarets and the mosques. So from there, we kept on driving, had a fun stop at the Doga Nordchi. It had this really neat suspended bridge we wanted to go walk through. Obviously, Mom didn't come onto the walk, didn't go on the bridge, but Dad and I did, and over the Vrabas River, which is the river that ends up in Jasce and feeds the major site, the major waterfalls there, which we'll see in a bit. So nice little stop here in the village of, or right before the village of Dogadnovci. Then there's Dad at the end, picture of the suspended bridge, and here's a picture of the village. And we finally arrived in Jasce in Bosnia-Herzegovina. There's still a village which had been inhabited since the second century AD, and it's located at the confluence of the Vrabas River we're on, and here is the Tiva River. And then this area is famous for these waterfalls. So, and very well attended, and these platforms to view it and so on. So, in the summertime, I assume this is a very busy place. So once we got there, we went to visit in the evening for a little walk down into the town, and went for coffee and dessert. So the next morning on day 19, we went up to go visit the fortress, which was one of the major sites. And here's a view from the fortress of the town. So we're pretty much at the top. And it was very futuristic. I think it was 7:30 by the time we got there. And apparently, I guess, in addition to being it's a famous waterfall and a fortress, it's all, I guess, a very multi-ethnic town. We've seen quite a few mosque and minarets, but there's also other faiths in this town. And I guess this was an important strategic town during the Ottoman and also the Austria-Hungary empires or periods. It was heavily fought over during the Bosnian War in 1992. So view from the top of the fortress, and now we're walking down towards the town of Jasce. So as we're making our way down, we have remnants of St. Luke or St. Mary's Church, and this is the St. Luke's Tower, and built in the 12th century. And then once we got to the town site, there was actually a mosque with a Muslim memorial to the people that passed away during the victims of the Bosnian War. And then there was a Christian memorial just across from it, just a few meters away, um, which shows the duality of this town in terms of cohort inhabitants. Kept on walking, and then we went along the town to the other side of the river, to the other side, to the before the falls themselves, upstream of the falls, and then had this nice little walk to go visit, to explore the town. You can see the fortress on the top here, so we're on the other side of the river here. And so about a half an hour, 40-minute walk, and then finally made our way to the other side, and we found this where Dad found this walkway. We came down, and we in this little area with a zip line. So we both pretended. Here's Dad pretending to take it, and then there's me pretending to take it, and then I captured the couple having a bit of fun, and a common theme throughout the day or throughout the trip. It's kind of fun altogether. And then we kept walking back towards town, went by this, you can see the Muslim cemetery, and again, the tradition of the tall and skinny tombstones. So from Jashtche, we had a big day ahead of us, and we were going to make our way to the Plivi, Plivichka National Park, Plivice, and then final destination of the day was to get to Zagreb. But it was interesting. There was a day again with rain um, and fog, and you'll see some of that in the pictures. You can see quite foggy behind us. We had a quick stop. Um, where was it? Yeah, we decided to stop for a quick a restaurant for coffee and cake. Um, and then, when we started driving after this restaurant here, that's when the driving got really tricky and foggy, and we wanted to make our way to Bosnia to the Prilivice National Park. We had these cascade waterfalls, but once we hit the park, we couldn't see 40 feet ahead of us. It was terrible, so we turned around um, and just decided to make our way to Zagreb. Just okay, we're going to miss out on one site, but that's the way it goes. It was too dangerous to go too far, to go further into this national park, and we probably wouldn't have seen anything anyways. You can just see from here. Before we got into elevation, you can barely see anything behind it. So started making our way to Zagreb, but we came across a small village called Rastoke, and we saw some cars parked along the cliff, so decided to stop and see what was of interest. And we found this watermill village where waters from the Slunjika River flows into the Corona River, and basically along these side mills and houses. So very interesting topography to see that. And then I guess it's similar phenomenon which was seen in that Plivice Park. So we're happy we stopped. And here's one. This is called the Horvoje waterfall, and then we have the Buck waterfall. You can see the water just flowing underneath these homes, and these were, I guess, water mills at one point. So lucky stop, lucky we missed out on one thing, and then we found this other thing just by accident. And finally made our way to Zagreb. And then we're going to spend a day here to explore, 2 nights in Zagreb, actually. And here's a Creative Commons photo to give you a sense of this is a cathedral here, the main square, which we went the next day. And here's the main market too that we went to visit the following day. No, this where we were staying not far from this main square, about 15-minute walk from here. I think that was the tightest parking spot I've ever been in, tightest parking lot. And thankfully, the dad was there to guide me. As we walked in, drove into this gate, it was similar to an opening like this in this building, much smaller actually, a few inches on each side of the car. But we made it through, got to park the car and go visit the following day. And here is the Vanier-Verbeek Park, just a block away from where we were staying, the start of our day. And with an interesting cultural and religious exploration, as you will see. So we started here in the park, and then again captured the lovely couple, and then we made our way towards the center square. But at the other end of the park, what we found was this mechanical weather post built in 1884. It's still functional, and it's got these paper rolls that record the weather and the temperature, humidity, pressure, air pressure. So this is a neat little find. So had a look at that, and then walked to the main square called Banaj Jelechica, I think. The square name comes from this man called or Bana Jelechica, a 19th century viceroy, governor, I guess, who led Croatian troops into an unsuccessful battle with Hungary because he wanted to win autonomy for his people. And this is a statue of him here. Here's a zoom of the statue of this Croatian leader. And you can see that this statue was here from the 1860 to 1940s. Um, then it was removed by the government at the time because it was closely linked to Croatian nationalism. But then it was dug up from storage in 1990 and returned to the square as a Croatian hero. And then notice the red scarf tie looking uh, red uh, sheet here. I guess we saw this in many statues across the city in this red scarf looking, and it was part of the Cravat Festival. So I guess the forerunner of the modern necktie was the Croatian invention of the cravat. And the tie was first used as an item of clothing by Croatian soldiers back in the 17th century. And the word cravat derives from the French cravate. And then I guess it's a twisted French pronunciation of Croat. So cravat is a Croatian symbol recognized worldwide. And there's, I guess, in October 18th is the declared as World Cravat Day. So it was good timing up for us. So here's the market we saw in an earlier picture from above. And then we have this Dolak statue. Um, I guess it's this market's called Kumika Barika. Or this is a statue called Kumika Barika, which is named Barika by the locals. It's modeled by this a friendly lady called Durlika Jancek, which they call the Kumika, which I guess they're people that are selling produce from stalls. And I guess this one lady that was the inspiration for this statue was selling her wares there for 50 years in this market. So one of the things to do, we got to see the cathedral from the outside. It was closed to the public because it's under major restoration following damage from an earthquake in 2020, but still impressive. So then we made our way to the square across. We can see the cathedral and a nice view here. And we just kept walking along, made our way through this interesting alleyway with some cool graffiti. And we wanted to finally find the St. Mark's Catholic Church with this really interesting mosaic roof. The church was built in the 1200s, and the roof was constructed in 1880s. It has coat of arms of Croatia, Dalmatia, and Slovenia on the left, and the emblem of Zagreb on the right. But it's closed off. This whole area, you can see these soldiers here, policemen, um, and I guess there was a terrorist act several years ago in one of the government buildings that are adjacent, so they've closed this whole thing off, and you can only visit it during Catholic Mass. So we did that later on. I'll show you. So this is a worship shrine to um, Saint, actually, no, sorry, Saint Mark's Catholic Church. So we then stopped for breakfast to celebrate Mom's birthday, day 20, October 20th. So that was her birthday cake, avocado toast. So it's fun. And the next site after lunch, after the birthday breakfast, was the Greek tunnel, built in 1943, was used as an air shelter. Now a tourist attraction. So fun to go and explore. It connects basically one side to the other, one street to the other of this little hilltop. And then after that, we decided after a break to go visit the Mirogoj Cemetery, um, which is an impressive cemetery, one of the most beautiful in Europe, apparently. And we agreed it was designed in the 1800s, 1870s. And then this major arcade in front of the cemetery looks like a fortress, but on the inside is this beautiful cemetery. And here we now are on the inside with one of the memorials right by the building. Um, and here's the architecture of it. Just stunning as a cemetery. And the cemetery itself was quite unique in many ways. First, the tombstones are huge in some areas and multi-generational, like you see here. And then a lot of them will have these unique statues and monuments onto the tombstones. And you can see how intricate and elaborate these are, which I haven't seen very often in many cemeteries. And I've visited quite a few. So very ornate, very thoughtful. And also, Um, Very diverse. You could see the diversity of all these tombstones, and then more traditional, like, but again, multi-generational and more ornate with statuettes. Here's another very big area, how many, 3 dozen people buried into this family plot. And just as the variety of tombstones are impressive, another thing that impressed us is there's a lot of people visiting the cemetery to pay their respect to their family members, ancestors. Although it was a Sunday, so not surprising, but I think it was more than I've seen in cemeteries around the world on a Sunday. Another practice that I noticed I hadn't seen before is people cleaning these tombstones. They're all very clean, and you can see obviously this seems to be a tradition that people taking care of their tombstones. I even saw one lady with soap and water and rubbing down the stone. There are bins everywhere to put garbage and dead grass and tree branches and weeds, and so a very well kept uh, cemetery. And the dad said a very eloquent comment. He says, if you respect the dead, you'll respect the living as well. So I'm glad we spent time to go visit this cemetery. And then another really peculiar thing is that the alleys had street names. So very cool for a nerdy genealogist like myself to see. And then we finally, after dinner, went back to the St. Mark's Catholic Church, and we were allowed in because we wanted to attend Mass, which I didn't notice, but Dad noticed that at the back pews were obviously people's undercover surveillance, checking us out, checking the congregation, making sure there's nothing going on. So very strong police guard surveillance. And back to this incident that happened years ago, but I guess it's still the threat. But it was a lovely mass, and we could understand. Uh, we couldn't understand the words, but we could follow the elements of the mass, being the same tradition as the mass back here in back home. And then I was able to take a few pictures before we left of the stained glass and the elegant murals inside the church in Zagreb. And then after the church, there was this fun moment. I think, oh yeah, here we go. I think we can hear it. Might not be able to record it, but it was this clarinet player and people dancing in the middle of the old square. So a fun moment there at the end of the day. So that was day 20. Day 21, woke up, Mom and I for a quick walk. We wanted to go do a little bit of shopping before we left for the day and made our way to our weather station in the park beside from where we were staying. And it was a crisp 7 degrees, 55 degrees humidity. This was all recorded here. You can see the temperature here of the thermometer, barometric pressure of 1025. And so a very nice, clear, sharp day to start. And today's exploration was to drive from Zagreb through Lake Balaton, which we had did at the beginning of the trip, but on the other side. Now we're going to be on the southern shores to make it back to in Hungary, and then we're going to stop and spend the night in Erd. And then we had this unscheduled stop in Varazdin, which was a fun town with a fortress that we got to visit. And we found just on the way, just driving through the side roads. We're trying to avoid the major roads most of the time, and then we did it this day as well. So yeah, we stopped in Varazdin, Croatia. This small medieval town. Um, and we just saw a road sign for it and decided to stop. And I guess it's first mentioned in historical sources in 1181. So quite a lot of history here. It was, I guess, had a defensive function, but it was had its own castle, and it was at the intersection of various ancient roads, trade routes. Um, so I guess it was also known as the Gate to Styria. I'm not sure where that is, but it, dates back to a long time ago, and it was also a defense fortification against the Turkish invasion in the 16th century. So our goal was to actually find this castle. So we just started walking around the streets, exploring, found this old church, walked by St. Nicholas Church, and it's this little open air restaurants and gardens, so quite nice, and very quiet. So a lovely place to visit in the morning. The St. John the Baptist Church, the main square. So these are locals, maybe a few tourists. Not a place that's highly on the tourist route. And we finally found the castle, and then the moat around it. So we were not able to go in, but we were able to go around and visit, and then you can see the views from the castle moat. So I guess this would have been all surrounded by water at some point. And this fits into a story, a love story we found in or just by the main square, related to this castle moat. And then it's the love story of Varazdin. I guess apparently it's one of the most beautiful love stories in Croatian literature. It's about Lieutenant Mile, early 19th century. And the story begins when this lieutenant saves the life of a 14-year-old Anastasia. And this is not the couple, but it represents what the couple would have looked like in that era. And I guess this Anastasia, she falls into the water of the moat, or the Baska, I guess they call it, the water around the moat of the castle. And then by saving her, he's being then welcomed every day as a guest in the house of Anastasia. And then when he's about to be sent to the front lines, she gives him an old family locket to protect him from mortal danger during the war. But on her birthday and would-be wedding of the 29th of September 1819, she dies. And then the lieutenant forgoes his military service, and twice a day for the next 50 years, visits her grave, and then walks around the moat and the Baska around the castle, and looks in at the window in which he always sees the silhouette of his predestined love. So what they did is they created this love crinoline to represent that love story. And then the story goes on to say that he was certain of his death. So on the 29th of September of a certain year, Lieutenant Mele dies, and then he's united with his Anastasia. So to commemorate this story, they create this massive statue, and people are invited to put a padlock on the love crinoline by performing the symbolic vows of unbreakable love. And when you do that, you become a co-creator of the sculpture. And to make this ceremony complete, you have to put the keys, you have to throw them down the old well. Here's a picture of the old well, which is still there. We didn't get a chance to go visit. Uh, but that by throwing down the keys, then you commemorate this story and the spirit of this love story. We didn't have a padlock to put add to the structure, but we quite enjoyed the story. And this is a picture of a Croatian author. They were kind of trying to recreate the idea of it. So after that, we kept going, driving from the Croatian and Hungarian countryside. No, it was a beautiful day, no clouds, or rain or fog, so it was quite lovely. Uh, Came across some interesting road signs, which we had a good laugh. So you've got some goats, and you got some wagons, and some tractors and bicycles. So we had a good chuckle at that. Some of these road signs we were seeing. And we finally made our way into Hungary, into Lake Balaton, and we started driving along the lake. I guess it's the largest lake in Europe, located in central Hungary, about 80 kilometers southwest of Budapest, and considered a national treasure. 600 square kilometers, 77 kilometers long. It's a very narrow but picturesque lake. We stopped in this called the Sphere Lookout in Balatonlel, Hungary, and to get a good view of the lake and some of the descriptions of the history of the area. And then we made our way to Erd, finally, just outside of Budapest to spend the night. Found a lovely restaurant for dinner. Funny sign that reminded us of Chris's adventures in Belgium and Leuven when she had taken the wrong train to the wrong Leuven. So took a picture of that and sent it to Chris to have a bit of a chuckle. And then spend the night in Erd, just a quiet night. And the big item of the day for day 22 was to go from Erd to Budapest for an inside tour of the famous Hungarian parliament. When we were first there at the beginning of the trip, the tour was fully booked. And so at the time we booked ahead for a tour for this day 22. There were some spots available. And so we stopped here for the day before we make our way to Vienna to take the plane the following day. So before the Parliament tour, we checked out some sites we didn't get a chance to see when we were there a few weeks ago. This is the entrance to Liberty Square, the main square in Budapest, which has been the scene of wars, rebellions, protests. And there's actually a Holocaust memorial for Hungarian Jews that were victims of the Second World War. Beautiful day here as well. Here's a view from Liberty Square, just outside the square itself. So we walked around. We stopped at the Kossuth Lajos monument, which I guess is uh, dedicated to former Hungarian president of the same name, and also a national symbol and scene of official celebrations. Stopped for coffee just before and kind of a lunch before the visit of the parliament. And then in this little cafe, we found these postcards that showed just a week before we got there. This is September 2024. This is beginning of September. This is towards the middle of the end. And then how the Danube flooded the whole area. So, and when we got there, it was back to this. It was some dirt you could see along when we were there along the walkway. Just crazy how the river is able to flood so high. And we're talking 20, 30 feet increase in the water levels. So it's interesting to find that postcard. So now we made our way towards the parliament. Here in the back, we have a statue of this equestrian statue. It's a Hungarian statesman who served as prime minister in the 1800s, late mid 1800s. And this is a memorial to another prime minister at the start of the First World War. These I won't even try to say these names. So the goal was to make it to the back to the Hungarian Parliament, so we could see apparently the extraordinary, stunning interior. And the grounds of the Parliament were actually are the seat of the government today. And I guess that's been a seat of the government for over 1,000 years. This building was designed and built in the early 1900, opened in 1902. And so we get a chance to visit one of the top sites to visit in Europe. So we had to come back and see this. And it's a 45-minute or so tour, and under security guards following us and security checks and so on. But once we got in, first thing we do is we go up the golden staircase, coated in gold leaf, and this is a golden ceiling. So it's just amazingly beautiful parliament. And then here's some of the halls of the parliament. Again, all gold crusted, red carpets everywhere. And then this is kind of the highlight. One of the highlights is the main entrance hall. Just takes your breath away. And it's, a lot more decorated and intricate than most parliaments, including the ones in Ottawa. But although I still enjoy visiting Ottawa Parliament, this was just on another level. Quite amazing. So we've got some stained glass on the side of the main entrance, the ceiling in the main entrance. So just incredible work. It's just took a decade to build this place. It's incredible. And then the other highlight, a couple of highlights. One is this meeting hall used for press conferences and for parliamentarians. And then you have the National Assembly itself, which is beautiful, ornate, old style wood decorations. Here we have the seat of the parliament chair, and this is a functioning parliament building. Luckily, they weren't sitting today. So once we get through that, the other highlight, one of the final highlights, is to visit the Dome Hall. This is a stock picture because we were allowed to take pictures. Is under armed guard that rotates every hour. And in the middle here is the crown jewels, Hungarian crown jewels, that were taken away during the Second World War to be protected by the Americans and were given back to Croatia by President Carter. So these, again, we weren't allowed to take a picture, but this is what we have seen when we were walked to where we could walk right close by to get a good look at these crown jewels. So I guess this is the orb and the Holy Crown of Hungary, which is said to been worn by King of Hungary Stephen the First. And the upper part of the crown was supposed to be provided by Pope Sylvester II at the first coronation in the year 1000. So this is quite an old relic of Hungarian history. So from Erd that morning, we went to Budapest to visit the apartment building, and we drove all the way back to Vienna. Crazy 2.5 hour long drive with endless line of transport trucks on the right hand side. It was insane. It was truck after truck after truck. That and I have never seen that. Their maximum speed was 90 kilometers an hour. So we kind of were in the left lane most of the time, but then we had these crazy drivers coming 140, 160 bailing behind us. So we had to find places to sneak in between trucks to let them by. Oh my God. So we couldn't really take the side roads this time because we had to make our way before sunset. And because we avoided to drive at night. We made our way back to Vienna. We're just outside of Vienna, and where we stayed close to the airport. And then day 23, final day, no touring, just basically take the plane from Vienna to Toronto and back home to Canada. So there it is. There's a trip that we had from October 21st to 23rd. A nice, beautiful adventure. Mom and Dad and Chris from half of it, and hope you enjoyed the presentation.